In 2017, a lawyer walked into a building in Madrid carrying a check for 222 million euros. He was there to buy a single human being out of his job, and the people inside that building said no. That's not a metaphor. That actually happened. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand why it happened, why almost everyone gets release clauses wrong, and why one Brazilian footballer accidentally broke an entire financial system just by using it correctly. Let's start with the biggest misunderstanding. Most fans think a release clause is just a fancy transfer fee, a number a club puts on a player, like a price tag in a store. Pay it and he's yours. That is not what it is, not even close. A release clause is actually a labor law, not a football rule, a labor law. It comes from a Spanish decree written in 1985, and here's the twist. It wasn't written for footballers at all. It was written for every professional athlete in Spain, basketball players, handball players, anyone who earns a salary playing sport for a living. Before 1985, Spain had a brutal system called the right of retention. Basically, a club could refuse to let you leave even after your contract ran out. You were legally stuck. Imagine finishing your job contract and your boss just says, "No, you still work here." That was legal in Spanish sport. So the government stepped in, and they built a workaround. They said, fine, a player can leave anytime he wants as long as he pays a pre-agreed exit fee. It was designed to protect the player, to give him a way out, which is almost funny because today, release clauses are used almost entirely as a weapon by clubs to keep players in. The tool built to free players from clubs became the tool clubs use to trap them. Now, here's where it gets stranger. When a release clause actually gets triggered, the money doesn't go from one club to another. People assume PSG just wires cash straight to Barcelona. Wrong. Legally, the money has to be deposited with the Spanish league itself. La Liga holds it, then passes it along. The selling club isn't even the first stop. Which brings us back to that lawyer with the check. August 2017, Neymar wants out of Barcelona. PSG is ready to pay his release clause, 222 million euros, a world record that still hasn't been broken. His legal team walks into La Liga's Madrid headquarters to deposit the payment, and La Liga refuses to accept it, just turns it away, citing concerns about financial fair play, the rules meant to stop clubs from spending money they don't actually have. For a few surreal hours, nobody knew if the biggest transfer in football history was even legal. Then, later that same day, in a completely different building, Barcelona quietly confirmed they'd received the payment anyway. Two organizations, two buildings, two different answers on the same afternoon. That single moment changed football finance forever, because once PSG proved a 9-figure release clause could actually be paid in cash without negotiation, every major club panicked. If a number on a contract can just be paid off like a vending machine, what stops it from happening to your best player? So Barcelona and Real Madrid did the only thing they could. They made the numbers insane. Karim Benzema, Fede Valverde, release clauses reported north of 1 billion euros. Not because these players are worth a billion euros, nobody thinks that. The number isn't a valuation, it's a warning sign. It basically says, don't even think about it. Here's something almost nobody explains properly though. A release clause isn't just expensive, it's absolute. Once the exact amount is paid, the club has zero say. They cannot negotiate, they cannot refuse, they cannot beg the player to stay. The law simply removes their veto entirely. Compare that to what people in England call a release clause. It's not the same thing at all. In the Premier League, a so-called release clause is really just a soft, private agreement between two clubs. It can still be haggled over. The selling club can still say no or ask for more or stall. Spain is different. In Spain, once the money hits the table, the decision is made. No club meeting required. Now, you'd think with numbers this extreme, clubs would want the money to actually get paid. But here's the part that surprises people. Since 2016, using a release clause is designed to be tax neutral. The money the player pays out and the money he receives from his new club basically cancel each other out on paper. Which sounds convenient, but it's actually why almost nobody uses release clauses to complete real transfers anymore. Instead, clubs quietly agree to a normal transfer for the same amount as the clause. Why? Because a real transfer deal lets clubs add sell-on percentages, payment installments, bonus clauses. A blunt legal release clause payment doesn't allow any of that. So even though the number stays the same, the method changes completely behind the scenes. And it's not just superstars living under these rules, because release clauses are legally required in every professional contract in Spain. Even lower league players and teenagers in academy systems carry them. Smaller clubs deliberately inflate these numbers, not because a 19-year-old is worth 10 million euros, but to stop wealthier clubs from swooping in and taking their best young talent for almost nothing. There's also a legal detail that changes how disputes get settled. Courts, specifically the Court of Arbitration of Sport, don't treat release clauses as sale prices. They treat them as something closer to pre-agreed damages for breaking a contract. That distinction matters enormously. It means a club can't later argue the fee should be higher because the player got better, and a player can't argue it should be lower because he got injured or lost form. The number freezes the moment it's signed, completely immune to whatever happens after. So if this is such a powerful legal tool, why doesn't the rest of the world use it? Here's the truth most explainers skip. FIFA's global transfer rules only allow something similar in one narrow situation: a player who signed his contract before turning 28 and who's completed at least 3 full seasons at that club. That's it. Everywhere else, in England, Germany, Italy, what people casually call a release clause is really just an informal gentleman's agreement with none of the legal force Spain's system carries. Which means every time you hear release clause thrown around in transfer news outside Spain, it's usually the wrong term entirely. So next time a transfer headline says a player has a release clause, ask yourself one simple question. Is this an actual legal right, like in Spain? Or is it just a nice-sounding number that two clubs might completely ignore the moment real money enters the room? Because in football, the biggest financial secrets aren't hidden. They're just written into contracts nobody bothers to read properly. If this changed how you see transfer news, subscribe. There's a lot more hidden money in this sport than anyone tells you.